Did you know that Gukesh didn't even use an engine for his preparation until he was above 2500 elo? It's absolutely incredible. It might be one of the reasons why he's the youngest World Championship challenger of all time. In this game, we're breaking down a somewhat enigmatic move and a great gameplay by Gukesh to hold off one of the best players in the world, Hikaru Nakamura, in a must-draw game in the final round of the World Championship Candidates. Now, you may already know the result of the game. You may not know the secrets behind the mysterious move played by Gukesh to completely equalize the game, even though he wasn't even in his preparation. So without further ado, let's just jump into it and show you this incredible game played by two of the game's greatest players. The D4 from Hikaru Nakamura, setting off on the right foot, a good opening. D5 by Gukesh, going for some sort of equality, because of course it's a must-draw game. He has to come out equal. If he's slightly worse, Hikaru can push that edge until the cows come home. C4, Hikaru Nakamura. D takes, knight to F3, and now knight to F6. The Queen's Gambit accepted on the board. What will Hikaru go for? Plays the best move, E3. Just solidifying that D-pawn. Sort of almost, not really, but sort of passing the move back to Gukesh. What does he want to do with the position? Well, he plays second best move, E6. There we see bishop takes C4, recapturing that pawn with the bishop, getting the bishop into the game. This is the whole idea of the Queen's Gambit, a name many of us have heard, but not all of us know the true meaning of. That's the meaning, just to get the pawn back with the bishop. It's not even a true gambit, as people like to mention, because white can win the pawn back. There's no way black can actually keep the pawn. That's why it's such a solid gambit. Normally a gambit would be, you don't get the material back, but you get some sort of initiative. That's not quite the case here. So bishop to E7, knight to C3 by Hikaru, and Gukesh lashes out with a pawn, C5, bringing the pawn to the same square as in the Sicilian defense, and this is just to break up that D-pawn. If he can trade that flank pawn, so pawn on the edge for pawn in the middle, it's slightly good for him. You know, he's already down the central pawn, so if he can actually get that sort of exchange back, he'll be in a very equal structure. Both sides have one central pawn, and he can fight for equality. But here Hikaru had other plans. At the top level, you can't just play the best moves. Otherwise, people know the best moves, they've analyzed them at home with a very strong computer. So you're almost not playing a human, you're playing a computer if you're playing all best moves. So Hikaru goes for a nice move, A3. Not the best move in the position, but that's not what he's trying to do. He wants to take Gukesh out of preparation. Maybe he's looked at this move somehow, but he's not going to know it as deep as Hikaru knows it. So Hikaru trying to get an advantage by not playing the best move sounds counterintuitive, but it's a very interesting way to play in, becoming the meta at the top level. But Gukesh just decides to castle. Hikaru does the exact same, and now we see A6 from Gukesh. Now both sides, it's not a monkey see, monkey do type thing, no, it's because it's very useful to stop that knight getting to B5. It's quite annoying. You can threaten to win the rook, all sorts of things you don't really want to allow. Hikaru continues bringing the queen out. You see B5 from Gukesh. The bishop moves back. Now he grabs the pawn in the center. Hikaru's left with what's called an isolated queen's pawn. Lots of history with this structure, but it's basically equal. Both sides can get chances with this sort of pawn structure. And here's the master move from Gukesh. What would you play here? Maybe a standard move, knight to C6. Maybe you want to get the bishop on that diagonal. Or there's actually only one move that keeps position as equal as possible. And Gukesh finds it. He wasn't even in his preparation at this point. On the past move, he thought for 15 minutes. And this move, I'm not sure how long he thought for exactly, but he was not in preparation, that's for sure. But he plays the correct move. And that's B4, which looks absolutely bogus. It just looks like it gives him a pawn, but in fact, no pawn is lost here. And it breaks up Hikaru's strong structure. Hikaru, if this pawn was just lost, he would have a 2-on-1, but of course that's not the case. This pawn is being almost given away to ruin Hikaru's winning chances. And how does that really work? Well, if you want to just grab that pawn first and foremost, Gukesh is going to recapture the bishop. This leaves white slightly better after rook d1 because this bishop isn't very well placed. You're not going to capture and give white two pawns in the center. That's not really going to be what you want to do, especially when you don't have any counteracting pawns. That c pawn would actually be a pass pawn. So Gukesh isn't going to do that. This bishop is actually going to be misplaced. That's why white would have a slight advantage there. No, he's going to bring the knight into the game. This pawn cannot be defended. Do you think, oh, I can have the defender with the queen? But no, there's two attackers, only one defender. The knight can just simply capture, and Gukesh is absolutely fine here. So what did Hikaru go for in the game? To B4, Hikaru thought for a little bit, and just has to play knight to E4, inviting the trade of knights. Not what you want to do when you have to play for a win. Hikaru must win this game. We can't stress that enough. Gukesh would like a win, but if Hikaru doesn't give him anything, at this level of chess, it's up to your opponent if you win, basically. They have to make a mistake. But Hikaru, if he wants to push for a win, he needs a mistake out of Gukesh, and that's hard to do in a very equal structure like this. So this move almost won Gukesh the Candidates. Of course, if Fabiano Caruana managed to win his game, the engines say he perhaps should have, but practically under the pressure, and with Nepomniachtchi defending, well, we can say Nepomniachtchi defending, it's quite hard to win against that guy. That's for sure. He saved a lot of endgames in this tournament. But even if Gukesh still drew this game and Hikaru won his game, there would have been a playoff, and who knows what would have happened there. But let's talk at the game at hand, and that game continued. Gukesh capturing out of the board, Hikaru capturing, and then we can see the game is very symmetrical. And as you may know, symmetrical games kill your winning chances. If there's an imbalance, one player might use the so-called imbalance better than the other player. We do have an isolated queen's pawn, but Gukesh will just blockade that as any good Russian schoolboy would, and we'll go on to draw the game. But chess, in theory, is not the same as in practice, and we have to see the practical play here. Knight to c3, Gukesh jumps into the middle of the board. Hikaru can now capture and get rid of his isolated queen's pawn, but that's basically agreeing to a draw. It's almost, if you do that, might as well just shake hands and go home. So bishop to d2, trying to keep some chances on the board. Captures, and now knight to d7. The knight can go to either of these two quite juicy squares, but I'd probably go to the king side, as I don't want to risk any sort of attack, because that'd be one of the reasons you could lose the game. So bishop to b1, a very enigmatic move from Hikaru. If you're new to the game, you're like, what the hell is he doing? When I move my pieces back, the engine always says I'm an idiot, and this might not be the best move, but again, Hikaru has to play for some sort of winning chances. He needs to get this bishop onto a better diagonal, maybe sit it on a nice square like d3, and maybe even get some kind of kingside attack going, but it's tough to see how that's going to happen. Rook to c8 by Gukesh, one of the best moves. Bishop to d2, and now knight to f6. As I said, knight has completed rerouting to a lovely square on f6, one of the most natural squares on the board, and now bishop to d3 again, what I was saying. Bishop takes f3, some pieces fly off the board. You might be thinking, Gukesh is giving up his good bishop, what's he doing? But as the pieces come off the board, it's going to be harder and harder for Hikaru to win this game, and that's basically the theme we see here. Hikaru even gives up the d-pawn, try and get some chances. He's got the bishop pair, which sometimes can be seen in his advantage, and the board is quite open, but as we can see, how is Hikaru going to get anything going here? The rook goes to d1, the queen just goes to a4, everything's defended. Queen to b7, attacking the pawn, but the threat is stronger than the execution. If you want to take this pawn, after Gukesh goes bishop to c5, if you can just grab here, of course Gukesh can trade queens, that's on the table. In fact, he can play queen to h4. And now what do? The mate is threatened, so you play g6, queen goes to h3, the bishop comes back, but now you can sacrifice the bishop. And now let's first look at what if you take. Taking is actually not a good move at all. The queen will check you, you have to block, the knight comes in, you'll have to go back somewhere, king to f1 seems to be the best move, and now knight takes on g3, you're going to move the king again, and material is completely equal. Your king is absolutely cooked out in the open, and Gukesh has some very active pieces. I mean, white is completely lost here, so of course, Hikaru needs a win. The loss would be terrible for him, he can't even allow this. So what happens if you don't take? If you just decide to slide your king over, well then you're just down a pawn and your king is weak, so Hikaru again can't allow any of this. He needs to stop this. That's why he plays bishop to e1, protecting that f2 pawn, but now, where's his chances? Everything in Gukesh's position is defended, he's very solid, and he's actually up a pawn, so Hikaru is losing the thread in this game very quickly. Queen to b5, he offers the queen trade, maybe trying to get something going in this opposite colour bishop endgame. Well, I mean, there's a knight still on the board, so Hikaru still has bishop pair, which good things can happen when you have the bishop pair, but Gukesh is not going to let anything slip. Pieces are sort of shuffled around, the pawns advance, the rooks are traded, and knight is very solid, it goes back. The pawns again come forward. This is all very equal stuff. I mean, in a game, I'd love to analyse each and every one of these moves, but it's quite a long game, so we're going to have to fast forward to some of it. Hikaru wins back a pawn. Again, now material is equal. The pawns advance. They get traded off. Hikaru actually eventually creates a pass pawn here, but with endgame technique, Gukesh realizes he can sneak behind the pawn and even let it promote because he has a pass pawn of his own. So we see Hikaru actually moves this pawn up the board, even manages to promote it with a little check trick. So see that check? Promotes the pawn, remember that motif for your games. Normally you'd win the rook here, but because black still has a pass pawn of his own, this is a theoretical draw. Both players will have studied this when they're probably about 2 years old. And after e3, Hikaru has to bring the rook back, and the easiest way to draw this is just to sacrifice the rook for the bishop. So does that, and now king versus king, as even a 100 elo player will know, is a draw. So Gukesh manages to draw because of the result in the Caruana and Nepomniachtchi game, manages to win the candidates, becoming the youngest candidates winner in chess history. So an absolutely amazing game. Even though it was a draw, it still was quite interesting even up to the end. And that move by Gukesh, let me just find it. b4 is absolutely stunning. I mean, who even thinks to play a move like this? If you go to Gukesh's POV, absolutely incredible. All these pieces to develop, and you decide to push a pawn for seemingly no reason. What a game. And hopefully Gukesh becomes the World Chess Champion. And I'll see you guys in the next video.